The poison of corporate-controlled information is pervasive within the American media landscape, which makes the Laura Flanders Show one of the most important places that we can go to understand how power works, the reality around us, and how to resist. This is Chris Hedges, and I listen to the Laura Flanders Show.
Go to patreon.com/The LF Show and become a member. Hi, I'm Laura, and this is the Laura Flanders Show, a TV and radio program that shines a light on the solutions of tomorrow today. We report on the people and movements driving systemic change from the worlds of politics, arts, and entrepreneurship. Welcome. 2020 was in lots of ways an unimagined year, but one, ironically, that underscored the importance of, you guessed it, imagination. We had to find creative solutions, creative ways to connect, and creative ways to move people to care about one another. Now, no one does this work of creative imagining and solutions finding better than artists. So today, we've gathered 3 activist artists from around the United States to talk about how they are using their art to transform a society in urgent need of a course correction. With me, hip-hop artist Xiuhtezcatl Martinez, interdisciplinary artist and social justice activist Favianna Rodriguez, and activist poet Aja Monet, who is also the artistic creative director of the Voices campaign at VDay. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the show.
It's wild to think about. It's been a year since this pandemic kind of began, but to the end of 2019, I was sitting on a project on an album that I created with another incredible artist from South Central LA named True. And we were getting ready to begin the rollout. I had a headline show booked in New York City. We were looking at booking spaces for the album release party in the Bay Area. And so my mind was very much towards 2020 being a year where my creativity and my art combined with the organizing work that I do, as far as the messaging and the stories being told within the music to really take center stage in my focus. I was excited to tour. I was excited to play shows. I was excited to book festivals and to release this music.
What's changed? What have you been doing since? Where are we speaking to you, as it were? Where are you speaking to us from?
A lot has changed over the last year. We released the project. We played our album release show in the Bay Area on February 29th, I believe. So it was like the week before everything started to get shut down. And I was actually ended up in Philly and basically spent the entire year in Philadelphia on the East Coast with my partner, living in a movement house with a bunch of organizers from Sunrise Movement. A lot changed and expanded, both within my art, within my view of the world, within my view of my own position in relationship to these movements. And it was really fruitful.
Aja, coming back to you, I mean, this was a year of clairvoyance, of vision, of things coming into focus, of things getting very clear, the good, the bad, the ugly, the possible. Talk about it, your 2020.
I think 2020 sort of, as ironic and weird and divine as it has been, and hard and difficult, and a lot of suffering has taken place, I think that gave fruition to the truth telling that we saw happening in the Bernie Sanders campaign around corporations and the ways that this country has really neglected our healthcare system and housing as a crisis, and all those things that were being championed in the movement for years. We say it's a movement, not a moment, right? So I think leaning on that in 2020 was so crucial, because we were like, we told y'all this could happen. There was a little bit of despair once Bernie Sanders had to step down, and this was kind of ushering itself into fruition, into the world, knowing that there was a global pandemic that was dawning upon our communities and upon our realities. And then obviously, as a cultural worker, like, your response is to think about, yes, what are the immediate material conditions of our people? And then how do we serve the imaginations and the hearts and minds of our people at the same time? I did a homemade poetry show that was online, streaming it before, so that people could have access to medicine, and thinking about herbal medicine and how we could go back to that practice. And so we saw a lot of Black and Brown Indigenous people returning to rest and returning to their interior worlds and thinking about themselves, having the space to do that, but while also struggling in thinking and imagining ways that we could be and show up better for each other if the government was failing us. It was a painful year, but I think it really brought us into our true potential when we collectivize and work together.
Absolutely. Favianna, to you, I mean, your work sits exactly at the juncture that Aja kind of pointed to between the internal and the external. You said you were hoping for a kind of internal year of working on your own work. What actually happened, and how has it affected your cultural work, your artistic work?
Well, first, I'm inspired by Aja just to say that I was focused on my healing, because what Me Too had also done is expose the gender inequality that many of us had been experiencing, and it gave us a language to be able to articulate how we had all been impacted. I think that in the movement, many of us, especially women of color, are moving at a pace, and we are holding the grief and the trauma of our communities. And it's important to move through that in order to heal from the cycles of trauma. And that just requires rest and it requires recovery. But when the pandemic hit, I live in an immigrant community in East Oakland, and my community immediately became one of the hardest hit, largely because there's so many essential workers here. To me, what the pandemic revealed and what it offered to us as cultural workers is that really for the first time in our human history, you saw the collapse of the old systems. And you also saw what they revealed, which is that capitalism is killing us. And as artists, we also were at a time when our art spaces were collapsing. The ways that we did art needed to be entirely reimagined. At the same time that our communities, but not just our local communities, not just the communities we identify with, but really the global community needed a new story. And we're still in that window. We have to be able to help people imagine what is the future. And I think that that's the hardest work for us as cultural workers, is to both hold the present and to be able to usher in a different kind of vision.
Xiuhtezcatl, I want to come to you on that. We're going to play a clip of your work, and it, to me, grapples a lot with the past, present, future, the relationship of yourself to your history. You talk about trauma as deep as the love. You talk about everything changes, everything dies, being a product of history yourself, but claiming your existence right here, right now.
Reach out and take my hand, open up your eyes, I'm gonna show you who I am. Escucha mi amor, tengo mucho que contar. Medio complicado, mi pasado tan real. Una historia de amor, quién sabe qué será, qué será. Espejo del cielo me lo dieron sin pensar. Como mis ancestros, elders read it in the stars, yeah. Boy to a man, I'm the product of a border in the sand, yes. I've been wide awake, I'm sick of the cold. I'm acting okay when I'm really afraid. Don't want them to know, dude. I'm here to try to get by. How we gon' live right? We didn't come here for free. No, we didn't come here for free.
You are a longtime activist, going back, I think, to the age of 6. You're now just entering your 20s. It seems to me you could have been a journalist, you could have been a teacher, you are all of those things in a sense. Why do you choose the medium that you choose? And what do you mean when, Favianna talks about mark making, you call yourself a code switcher?
As a young person beginning to understand and step into the world of hip hop as a very vibrant culture, it was really beautiful for me to look at other artists who were using this platform to speak about revolution, to speak about class struggle, and to speak about how, just to give a voice to our people and to our communities. And really, I had the privilege as a young kid growing up, in Boulder, Colorado, which was a very white community, to sit with OGs in my community and kind of some of the just local carriers of knowledge in the hip hop culture and in the hip hop world. It's really listen and understand in the history of hip hop culture and where it comes from and why it has continued to be a relevant force in the world. It is one of the most powerful cultural elements, I think, in reaching and connecting the world. It is one of the United States' greatest exports if you look at how it has influenced the entire planet as a music culture. And so I think for me, diving into that culture and that history, and also understanding the opportunity to tell new stories within that are true to my identity and what I've been experiencing and what I've gone through, it's a space, and it opens up a space for dialogue in a different way. Art in itself, I think, can be either for a capital gain or for revolution. And I think it's important to acknowledge how significant it is in pushing the envelope culturally on the conversations we have and how we view these different issues.
Favianna, you talk about artists sort of marshaling their superpowers to help people imagine and create. Think through that a little bit for people who are watching who maybe think of art as art on the wall or a movie they go to when they could go to movies. How does art do that work that you and everybody on this panel is talking about?
Art shows us what's possible. It opens up our imagination, and our imagination is very important because when we're able to experience something in the future that doesn't yet exist, it gives us a marker of where to go.
Hi everyone, I'm Favianna Rodriguez, artist and activist. And today I'm going to show you how to create your own social justice poster. We are in an unprecedented time in our human history, and the role of artists has never been more important. Artists help us see the light in times of crisis, and they help us imagine a better future. Let's get started. A social justice poster is about communicating and showing your values. What do you care about? Freedom, racial justice, gender justice, the environment? I care about all of those things, and I love to make art that inspires people to act.
Not to mention that as human beings, we've been held together through story throughout millennia. It is actually what shapes us. Stories and narratives shape societies, and we live under a story today. We live under a story of domination and colonialism. But it wasn't always that way. And it's not about new stories. It's actually returning to our ancestral stories, returning to the stories of how we relate to each other, to the natural world, to all creatures on earth. The most, powerful movements throughout the world have been important because of the work of artists, whether it's like Victor Jara or the Mexican muralists.
Victor Jara, victim of the Chilean coup under Pinochet.
Yes, he was so dangerous that when they killed him, they cut off his hands. A guitarist, which, to this day, people sing his music. The thing about also our work is that it transcends time and it lives beyond us. And it is truly a way for us to inspire and help people feel. In the colonial mindset, it's all about our mind. But in reality, as human beings, it's about what we feel in our bodies, the experiences, right? How we move. So I think the work of artists is not just a nicety, it's a necessity. It's actually core to our survival. And if it wasn't that way, you would not have white supremacy in the cultural sector. I mean, the cultural sector, film, television, music, performance, dance, publishing, every single art form is dominated by white men. And so culture is not neutral. Culture is a battleground.
Is there a piece you're working on now you want to talk to us about?
For me, the power of plant medicine and really what we know in what people refer to as psychedelics is that it's an accelerated way for us to heal from trauma. It's no surprise that we are at a time when these medicines are being legalized, but we also, of course, face the same thing we did with cannabis, which is that you have white people kind of hoarding the benefits of it. What I'm working on is I am writing a script about how women of color, a story about how people of color are using the medicine to heal. I feel that it's time to disrupt this wall of whiteness.
This is the Laura Flanders Show. I'm Laura. My guests are all social justice activists, armed, they might say, with art. Favianna Rodriguez calls herself an interdisciplinary artist, entrepreneur, and organizer. She's the co-founder of several institutions, including the Center for Cultural Power, where she currently serves as president. Xiuhtezcatl Martinez, also known as X, is an indigenous climate activist, hip-hop artist, and musician. He's the former youth director of Earth Guardians. We heard his new song, El Cielo, earlier in the show from his album We Didn't Cross the Border Crossed Us. It's slated for release this spring. Finally, Aja Monet, revolutionary poet and VDay artistic creative director of the Voices campaign. We'll tell us more about that in just a bit. But first, here she is on this show a couple of years back, reading her poem, Revolution, from her then just released book, My Mother Was a Freedom Fighter. You can check out that episode can hear more of her readings and my interview with her about that book in our archives at lauraflanders.org. That's also where you can watch this episode and see all these lovely artists in action. And while you're there, you can sign up for our newsletter to get information on all our web exclusives, including my commentaries. The latest is, instead of tanks and tasers, can't we arm our cities with military-grade healthcare instead? Here's Revolution by Aja Monet from her book, My Mother Was a Freedom Fighter.
In 2012, scientists claimed they found the God particle, this question, this troubling missing factor of our weight, our hold, our value they claim. And yet we have no evidence except the collision of values. Most of what we know and how we see ourselves is determined by 5 Western countries, 5 of which determine value by how well they kill others. And we out here screaming Black Lives Matter, as in exists, or takes up space, as in atoms, molecules, as in mass. Ain't there some funny irony there? I'm starting to believe that this is all we value, is each other's death more than life. And if life's so valuable, how come? How so? It's not lost on me that death is part of life. Some die so others live, but who is doing all the dying exactly at the expense of all this living? And are you really being?
Aja, as I understand it, you are creating a new piece to replace the vaginalogues in the VDay movement, and you're also looking for submissions. Can you talk about that?
So Voices is a new interdisciplinary performance arts project and campaign that's grounded in Black women's stories, which is by VDay. And VDay is an organization that started after the Vagina Monologues over 20 years ago. And this piece we're creating is to unify the vision of ending violence against women, cis women, trans women, and non-binary people across the African continent and the African diaspora. The real heart of this project is recognizing that in this time, we must endeavor to understand, to listen, to build a movement on care. Is a movement whose time has come. The project is called Voices, so we're shifting our focus from our vaginas to our voices as women, and thinking about that as a political decision in solidarity with people who identify as women across the globe, and to connect, to make sure that women in the West, who are often being heard a lot more than not, right, are listening to women in on the continent. There's a huge effort to use this piece to organize, and also to understand that poetry is a divination practice. We're stepping into like the shamanistic understanding of what a story can do, how it can transform, not just in the hearing, but in the telling. And what does it mean for us to actually be in that exchange of listening as a form of speaking? But I think it's also about the discipline and the work and the labor it takes to sit down and dedicate to the creation and the creativity of one's imagination. That is a labor. And so we're also trying to, compensate women who take that time to tell those stories.
It's beautiful. I mean, you're telling a story that reflects, or I resonate a lot with, because I think about journalism as not one person going out and doing X. It's about an ecosystem, a building of relationships, and a continuing telling of stories. One of the people that we talked to in preparation for this conversation is Adrienne Marie Brown, who has been doing that conjuring and healing and divining work for many years. From her most recent work, she read a portion for us recently. The book's called We Will Not Cancel Us. The full interview is at our website, but she begins by talking about how we are a nation not divided but torn, a nation in which we must decide to choose to push towards life. Here's Adrienne Marie Brown.
I have had to choose life from deep within me. That's why I'm still here. I want to live. I want to live. I think everyone chooses each day to move towards life or away from it, though some don't realize that they're making that choice. Capitalism makes it hard to see your own direction. I'm writing this in July of 2020, from within the COVID-19 pandemic. As I have watched the world respond to the pandemic, the borders between nations shift meaning in my mind. I can see which countries choose life and which don't, which countries have a majority life-oriented citizenship and which countries and regions elect leaders who they believe will care for them. Which countries pivot at the highest governmental level to protect their people, to guide their people, to protect themselves. Places with a variety of economies and exposure have found ways to move towards life. And I have a footnote here that feels important, which is I'm aware that anti-abortion efforts have long staked a claim on being pro-life. I want to reclaim the language of choosing and orienting towards life for a much broader framework of choices and behaviors that align with long-term human existence. I do not think we should surrender language to those who misuse and denigrate the sacred spell inside of words. End of footnote. I wonder about the movements in those other countries, what it might feel like to live and organize in a place that truly orients towards life. I don't want to romanticize any human experiment. I know each country has its trade-offs, but what would it be like to have leadership able to admit being wrong when new information presents itself about the dangers around and amongst us? What would it be like to organize and apply pressure to a government committed to adapting such that the majority of its citizens stay alive rather than the stubbornness to stay the same? In our current context, it feels like movement has to push towards life against an avalanche of crisis energy that undermines a viable future.
Adrienne there says that we tend to submit to the shrinking of our words, the magic of our words. We also tend to submit to the shrinking of our expectations of our government, of one another perhaps, and of our futures. If you were not to submit to shrinking of your expectations of this period, this administration, our movements in this time, your fellow artists, how would you articulate those expectations, which in my heart kind of verge on demands?
I don't have high expectations for the government, but I do believe in the people, and I believe in the power of the people to instigate and agitate until what we want and need to happen happens. And I'm excited. I'm really excited about this time. I think, it's going to get worse before it gets better.
I hear it. X to you. We often end this program by asking, what do you think is the story the future will tell of this moment? We've got about 3 minutes left. What's the story you think will play out in this time?
I think if this year showed us anything is that what becomes politically possible is dictated and shaped by social movements and by organizers and by people's will to stand together. We saw so many strides in indigenous liberation movements that were possible because of Black organizers and because the movement for Black lives and this entire conversation around white supremacy that for me really showed us how connected our liberation is. And I hope and I dream that this moment can be remembered as a time where our movements and converged. The obstacles are absolutely enormous. And I think it will take all of us organizing together and combining our power in order to shape and shift the future. So I think this can be a crossroads in a lot of ways. And I think it's not just in our heads and it's not just in our dreams, because we saw that happen this year. The calls for police abolition and defunding the police, that was not only seen as politically impossible, not so recently, but culturally unthinkable. And now coming to this crossroads where culturally we are ready to have these conversations of not just a world without these, violent systems, but an alternative that is more beautiful, that is more equitable, that actually invests in our people, in our communities, in our well-being, that is separate from these violent systems, that exists beyond that.
To you in Panther headquarters of Oakland, Favianna, last word.
Yes. Well, I just want to make sure that we don't allow white supremacy to steal our joy. I mean, let's remember that the victory we saw in places like Arizona and Georgia is all a reflection of the growing power of our movements, of our cultural workers, and that, our long-term vision and how we build power is panning out right now. We are securing real wins that are going to have a real material consequence for our communities. So I am very much trusting and excited about the leadership of women of color, bold, Black, brown, Muslim women who are going to, help us usher in a different kind of democracy.
Favianna, Aja, and Xiuhtezcatl, thank you so much, all three of you, for being with us on the Laura Flanders Show. We will include more links to your work at our website. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate y'all.
So 2020, it was a kind of unimaginable year. Sure, there were certain things about it that we could have predicted, but in lots of ways it surprised us. I know for myself, I started out the year doing this show in a fancy studio under someone else's lights, all dolled up, talking to my guests face to face. I ended it a few months back in a small cabin in upstate New York, sort of jerry-rigged to do a TV show, talking to people via internet link in little boxes on a platform called Zoom. At its worst, it was a year of disconnection, alienation, loneliness, lack of contact, and worse if you didn't have good access or no access to the internet at all. At its best, though, the year of our first experience with the COVID pandemic was a year of lots of prods to be curious. What are people's lives like outside of that connection box on the internet? What's their life like behind that bit of wall you can see? What's the noise that's sort of filtering in from offstage, as it were? How are they living with their families? What are they up to? What are they doing in there? I was reminded of the artist Anna Deavere Smith, who calls acting an act of empathic imagination. Empathic imagination's a muscle we have to exercise, she says, imagining ourselves into one another's realities. It's a muscle we have to exercise more, it seems, these days. With so much in flux, what if the reality is we can never know what the future brings? What if the future isn't what we know, but what we imagine? As another artist, the novelist A.M. Holmes once said to me, what if the future isn't what we know, but what we imagine? Let's imagine. Let's stay curious. Let's thank artists for their help. For more information on all my guests, along with a suggested reading, watching, and listening list, you can go to patreon.com/The LF Show and find all sorts of other episodes to explore on artists who are activists and activists who are artists. While you're there, take your own artistic action by joining our team. Become a member. We don't take funding from corporations or the government. We are dependent on people like you. So how about it? Make a contribution. Just a few dollars a month keeps us going, keeps us imagining that a future is in store. That's patreon.com/The LF Show. Sign up today. Thanks for listening. This show is produced by yours truly, Laura Flanders, Matt Colacello, Jeremiah Cothren, Mercedes Gorstiaga, Jeannie Hopper, Nat Needham, David Newman, Rory O'Connor, Charlotte Prager, Ryan Holtz, and Sabrina Artel. Major funding for this program is provided by the Novo, Tomcat, Cloud Mountain, Fonda, Park, Shift Tides, and the Poss Family Foundation, as well as listeners like you. Thanks for listening. Thanks for contributing. Thanks for your ideas. Stay kind. Stay curious. Till the next time, I'm Laura.
Life, a series of moments, may I borrow one of yours? I promise to use it wisely. And I'm honest more than I'm timely. Searching is where you find me, I'm searching for more than answers. I'm searching for more solutions, searching the sky for stars, disguised by utter pollution. I'm searching my mind for truth, buried in my excuses. I'm sick of the lack of balance, I'm sick of not dreaming lucid. I'm sick of feeling so sick inside. The heart would be sick unless you live in a lie. So far from the future, but I feel I've arrived, and I'm up to the night. Your perception of me is set, but I'm different inside. I fly underwater, I swim in the sky. Clandestino, how to live in disguise. When I'm closest to falling is when I'm feeling alive. When I'm furthest from knowing is when I'm falling in love. This is a response to the call of the wild. It's been calling for a while now. Humans foolish to think we'd ever conquer the wild. Rivers out when the roads by the furthest of miles. I feel every breath like it's lasted a lifetime.